Adult film operators, what is the most awkward moment you had? What do you feel when you film, and how is your job generally? I used to shoot fetish films in college and for a few years after I graduated college, 2010 to 2016. I have a degree in photography and was in Boy Scout, and I'm very good at knots. So a friend got me into it by helping tie up men and women and photographing them for her fetish site. This led to me doing tons of more work. The worst is feeder industries work. These poor women would just eat and eat on camera and then vomit and gag all over themselves. It was pretty rough stuff to photograph and film. Also, it would make me kind of sad because these women would gain large amounts of weight quickly between each time you'd work with them, and it just didn't seem healthy. As has been said already, the worst part is the smells. Group sex and the feeder scenes. The smells were enough to make you gag sometimes. Also, if you want to make decent money, you have to do both gay and straight scenes, which as a straight male at first is really odd, but you get used to it shockingly quick. The worst part is you become kinda numb to it all when you're behind the camera. Like, you will meet your model, and she will be very attractive, but as soon as you're behind the camera, it becomes very much so a job of you become focused on getting a good shot and the lighting correct. The awkwardness of them being naked in front of you disappears so quick. You sort of become numb to it all to the point in your personal life. Nudity and sex doesn't affect you the same. One of the most awkward things was when models would show up with their boyfriends who would just be like really weird and awkward in the set background. Like, it would almost always be buff military or former military dudes or wannabe MMA fighter types, and they'd stand cross-armed off to the side and being very encouraging to their girlfriends' boyfriends while watching them get sex. I personally just always found that odd. I understand they came, I guess, to make them feel safe, but some of the weird things they'd say would always make you scratch your head. Only got finished once and it just grazed my leg. Got squy droplets hit me a few times. Never really got involved with the scenes other than that and tying people up. Honestly, sets were much more professional than I imagined when I was younger. Most of the girls were not like crazy of easygoing girls who wanted to get sex constantly. It was literally them turning it on and off for the camera. I worked with a smaller budget company, so I never saw fluffers, and I honestly question if they really exist. It would be common to see the guys sort of just casually be jorking off between shots to keep it up, which is sort of weird. You'd be talking to them about asserting a shot up, and they'd just be jorking it the whole time. Pay was pretty good. Usually on set days was about $60 an hour paid out in 4-hour blocks. So even if you worked 6 hours, you'd get paid for 8, which was cool. You're an independent contractor / freelance, even if you tend to just work for one company. I'm mostly out of that world now with the occasional shooting for some girls who I've stayed in contact with to shoot for their OnlyFans pages. Commenter 1. The phenomena you describe reminds me of technical directing a multi-camera interview. At the end, someone could ask what was discussed, and I'd have no idea because I was so focused on working the switcher and calling out direction to camera operators. Commenter 2. The comment about pay reminded me about a conversation I had when I was a freelance camera op. I found a job listing online for a camera op for a short film. 4 days of shooting, maybe 5, 7 hours a day. They liked my resume and called to offer the job. When they asked my rate, I told them it was $450, including the camera gear. She balked a little and said they only had the budget for $250. Would that be okay? I didn't have anything scheduled those days, so I could make $250/day or nothing, and so, of course, I said yes. Then she says, okay, $250 an hour times 6 hours a day is $1,500. That's when you realized that we weren't talking about the same thing, and I wasn't interested in shooting adult films at the time, so I politely declined. But it was a very attractive offer, and I did very much consider doing it. 15 years later, I really regret not doing it. I could have made so much more money, and now I know that no one gives a crap, though I thought they did, if you were a camera op of this industries. That's kind of like the work I do now and same. I produce for a company that does how-to classes and talks on stuff in the textile industry, and I barely pay attention to what's going on since I'm so focused on running the switcher and cameras at the same time. Story 2. Former adult films producer here. I've mentioned stories here on Reddit that were more sad than awkward, and though I didn't run the camera all the time, there was awkwardness abound. During setups, it's common knowledge that the guy needs to either start getting hard or remain hard. In straight films, the woman will intimately interact with the guy to keep those juices flowing. In gay, back in 03, the guys were straight, so they would watch straight films. On more than one occasion, the guy would be jorking off and causally look at me and say, "Sup," while I was working. You can make the argument that he was probably gay, but I was the least attractive man on that set. On a straight film set, the guy was plowing the woman missionary style in between setups. The woman wanted a blanket from her car, but needed to tell me where the keys to her car were. So while getting sex, she was like, "It's in my gym bag, side, pocket." I once opened a dishwasher in a studio to get a plate and found the whole top rack filled with adult toys. They were used by performers doing live sessions. Some guy came up and was like, "There's my favorite," and took a blue toy from the rack. Devin Davis, the now deceased wife of Jonathan Davis of Korn, was best friends with Jill Kelly back when I worked for her. They did a photo shoot where they were eating each other's, like 5 feet from my desk. Devin kept her wine glass on my desk and kept walking up to me like, "You're getting hard, huh?" I really wasn't, and just wanted to work without causing any waves since Jill was my boss. She later got mad because she demanded I picked up dog crap from Jill's dog, and I told her no. Our set photographer, who was gay, was like, "I took a banana that big once and I got dizzy." Sure enough, the scene stops and the bottom went to stand up and took a second step saying, "Man, I'm a bit dizzy." I guess some of those aren't really awkward, but the most awkward thing on every set is the whole crew sitting in silence watching a guy jock off. He announces when he's about to finish, and the crew, and woman or man, swing into action to get the shot. Come on, they won. Gay actors are straight? I mean, I guess I figured a lot of lesbian would be straight girls, but straight guys doing it surprises me. Edit. Damn sake, I always thought a gay for pay was a joke. Now my eyes, just my eyes, have been opened. Comment t'es-tu? So on random adult videos, you'll find comments complaining that the actors are obviously straight. And then there are the adult sites that play into that fetish, like Broke Straight Boys. There you'll find comments complaining that the actors are obviously gay. There's no pleasing some people. Comment t'es-3? The straight category is always misleading EMO. Like a video would be titled with straight, but show an ass gaping wider than a Wii remote. Most captions make no sense. If you look at videos with Arab or Middle Eastern in the title, it's full of random Italians or Brazilians. Comment t'es-four? The most awkward thing on every film set is the whole crew sitting in silence watching a guy doing himself good. He announces when he's about to come and the crew, and woman, man swing into action to get the pop shot. This is like that public speaking and suddenly you're naked nightmare, only about 1,000 times worse. Story 3. I was an extra in scores of adult videos for one of the bigger websites. Here is how. A buddy of mine was super into adult film. Not just watching, but fanboyed the girls, liked to go to conventions. I always found the conventions awkward myself. He asked me to go with him one year, so I did. We stopped at a booth. He wanted to get some autographs. I didn't care too, so he jumped in line and I hung back behind the crowd. I stuck up a conversation with some English dude. He was super cool. Quickly discovered he was a popular male talent. I asked him, "Hey, in like a classroom scene, there are students who start in the class but leave when the sex starts. How does one get to be those guys?" "Oh, dude, we always need extras. Hey, we are having a barbecue on Saturday. If you want to come, you should text me." I take his number, tell my buddy about it when he comes back, and he freaks out. He wants to go. I text Kieran. He gives me the details. Huge mansion in the Hollywood Hills. We park, knock on the door. Some random dude with a shaved head answers. "You the guys Kieran invited?" Yeah. Cool, come on in." The guy was the cameraman. He had us sign some waivers and filmed us saying our names, that we were not under the influence, and we were done 18 while holding our IDs up. Quickly realized this was no normal barbecue. That was just the setting for the scene. The crew, 3 people, Kieran and the starlet, were all super cool people. Very nice. Didn't mind any of our questions, and were super welcoming. Their crew was 3 people, a director, a set builder, and a cameraman. The starlet was there, and Kieran. A married couple was also there, just hanging out. Weren't in the scene at all. We had no lines, but we're just supposed to pretend we were talking with Kieran and give some OMG looks at the beautiful girl in the bikini outside, things like this. We were there a few hours. At one point, I was told if I was thirsty to help myself to Cokes in the pantry. I opened it up, and it was wall-to-wall condoms, home enema kits, and roll after roll of paper towels. On the floor was one 12-pack under a box of plastic gloves. It was super interesting. Eventually, they had the shots they needed from us extras, and were going to get to the action. We were given $100 checks, and were thanked for our time. The director liked us and asked if we'd like to do it again, flat $100 per day. We said yes, and he told us his assistant would be in contact whenever we were needed. I did scores of scenes and got a lot of my friends extra work too. I was football players, a married guy whose wife cheats on him, did that several times, a club goer, a survivor-like contestant, a wedding guest, a ping pong player at a party, and time of other things. It was a lot of fun, meet a lot of really cool people, and got some great stories. The crew and most adult stars I met were all super nice, relaxed people. Was definitely an interesting time. Commenter. My uncle's best mate used to have his own photography business. He stopped about 8 years ago. He always mentioned a story where a woman approached him and asked him to take photos of her so she could give the album to her husband for his birthday. Naked pictures of her using sex toys and so on. Anyway, she'd apparently been using a toy on her back passage, and she was around 2 hours into the shoot. She finished with the toy and was spreading her cheeks when a little nugget of poo came sliding out. which just so happened to be caught on camera with her showing a face of absolute horror. She got changed and left and paid for the pictures several weeks later, except the one of the Great Escape. I never did see those pictures, so can't say for certain. Story 4. I had a good friend who went to film school and ended up in LA trying to make it. He wasn't getting a lot of work, but through some connections he had met at a party, he was offered a gig as a camera person on adult films. He did it for a few years, as discreetly as possible. Apparently, it's an open secret that many camera persons and even directors early on in their careers will do some moonlighting shooting films. James Cameron began his career shooting adult films. Edit. I did a little research on this and can't find a damn thing to back this up. Could be just an unfounded rumor. We had a really long discussion about it once, and these are the big things I remember. 1. The job can be really boring from a creative perspective. Most production companies were very rigid with the shots they wanted, and it didn't leave much room for artistic license. Keep in mind this was like 15 years ago. Things may have changed. 2. The worst part by far was the smell. Anyone that's ever shot a film indoors knows one of your greatest enemies is the massive heat generated by the lights and equipment. Imagine 2 people going at it for hours in a room that's getting steadily hotter. 3. Substances everywhere. Lots of male performers use some kind of Viagra coupled with other crap to desensitize their little friend. Powder is rampant among female performers. The more professional production companies usually ran a tight ship with regards to substances, but most of the amateur ones, it was anything goes. 4. A surprising number of cream pie shots are faked. Apparently, it's harder for a male performer to finish from usually sex than from just jorking off. Remember, lots of Viagra and hours of desensitized pen plus other substances. So when a cream pie needs to happen and the male performer can't do it, they use a special white liquid and squat it up. Then they have the guy stick his pen in, and after a few thrusts, it looks like he finished. He said you can usually tell because there's a telltale transition cut right before the cream pie shot. It's also why when there's an actual legit cream pie, the male performer will pull out and squat a little bit to prove it was a legit creampy. 5. Everyone is surprisingly normal. They're just people doing a job for the most part. The industry has some assholes and creeps, but in the mid to high tiers of the industry, people treat it like any other professional job. Story 5. Yesterday, I learned how to understand the different qualities of leather and tricks of the industry to sell more leather products. Genuine leather is actually a common label for low-quality grain when compared to top-grain leather, which bears more characteristics of the leather and has a tighter grain to let less crap in. Today, I learned why there's the little pull-out squee in adult films and why that's a sign of quality. Story 6. I'm a photographer who has on a few occasions taken photos of this process, usually for friends who have OnlyFans. But my story is from before I did so. A model reached out for me for a shoot. We chatted normally and talked out some minor details. Nothing explicit, just a bit of topless stuff. Mind you, I didn't know her at all. She was a random person who reached out on Instagram. She texts me and tells me that we are going to FaceTime at 12 a.m. I insist that we can talk tomorrow and that I'm already in bed, and she persists. It's fine. I hate FaceTiming, especially with people I don't know, especially at midnight when I'm already cozy in bed. She calls me and is in the middle of taking a piss, completely nude and drunk off her ass. I was taken aback and told her we can just talk tomorrow. She gets upset and says that we need to talk now so she can show me her body and her tattoos. She says this as she's wiping up. I was super skeeved out and hung up. Needless to say, I did not feel comfortable doing a photo shoot with her and I ghosted. I also had another person hit me up to do a pregnancy fetish photo shoot. Turned that down fast because I don't generally kink shame, but pregnancy films weirds me out. Story 7. I was the model for an act outdoor shoot and was posing on a pretty big boulder. Felt a tickling on my ass. Looking there and there was this lizard just chilling on my butt. Was so surprised I almost jumped off the rock. The photographer was very amused. I also learned that rock climbing naked is a lot of fun. Commenter. That's not my boulder. Why is it soft? Where's my boulder? Confused lizard noises. That lizard probably. But seriously, I'm glad you had fun and got the shots you needed to. I also want to try naked rock climbing now. Story 8. My friend is a photographer and has been hired by some low-level adult films companies to do shoots. He said one thing no one thinks of when looking at video is the smells. He says mostly bow and cigarettes with some genitals in there too. One time he was working and after words, the girl in the process started to flirt with him while sweaty and naked. He said it was really gross and uncomfortable. Commentaire. I wasn't an extra, but actually auditioned for adult films when I was 18. After all the STD tests, they scheduled a live audition. I show up and meet the crew and the female actress I'm supposed to have sex with, who is super hot, BTWO. No, I don't remember her name. So we finally get on set, and it's time to get down to business, and there are about 8 people in the room. I'm expecting most everybody to leave. I figured there would be me, her, the cameraman, and maybe one other person in the room. The only problem was, nobody is leaving the room. She starts by giving me a BJ, but I'm so nervous. And and with all the people watching my pen has stage fright. They tell me to take a minute and go to the bathroom and try to get my little man to rise to the occasion. To make a long story short, I couldn't get it up in front of all the people. Story 9. Ooh, an Ask Reddit I can actually respond to. I'm a makeup artist in the adult film world. I'm there on set all the time, so I see it all. Nothing has really been awkward for me. I'm pretty laid back, and it all just seems pretty natural for me, just like people doing their jobs. I guess the most awkward moment is if I can tell the two actors don't have chemistry or they're not attracted to each other. I feel like it shows on film. That's the only moment I could describe as being awkward. Oh, actually, it was really awkward for me. This one time filming a gang scene, I went into a different room to clean my brushes, and one guy took a break from the gang to come and talk to me. He was stood there naked while asking about my job. I've seen literally everything. But it was pretty ox one guy leaving a room from having sex with Star to come and talk to me about nothing multiple times. He was twice my age, too. I asked him if he was probably needed on set, and he agreed. Some people have mentioned fake comm, and yeah, it is used sometimes. Usually they'll get the real one shot and use the fake one to get a better angle if needed. Like if he was aiming for the boobs and misses, we'll use the fake one to make it look hotter. I've been a spare set of hands on set before and have been the one to finish on an actress. Job in general is awesome. I met some really cool people and have made some awesome friends. I don't get turned on during filming before you ask, except maybe this one scene where it was one girl and two really attractive guys that were also both bi and all really enjoying themselves. It is pretty hot when I can tell the actors are super into it and enjoying themselves. I also knelt down one time to pick something up and got covered in squee. That was pretty funny. I've had to put makeup on butts that were covered in bruising from BDSM shoots they'd had before. Also put makeup on nipples that they wanted to look pinker. I can think of other funny things that happen if you're all interested. Most things aren't awkward, honestly. They're all just human bodies and things happen. I guess most people that would find bodies awkward wouldn't be working in the industry. Story 10. I had to shoot the ugliest couple I have ever seen. Woman looked like a 6-foot ogre, and man looked like a tiny Harry Potter with a soul patch. They had zero chemistry, and she kept looking at his pen and trying to make this sultry face, but it looked like she was confused and disgusted by it. They also insisted on shooting in the hot tub, but she was the exact same color as the stucco behind it. Story 11. Not photographer here, but cinematographer. When I was at the beginning of my career, I accepted a proposal to work on a hard movie. After the second day of filming, the director approached me and told me, "It's clear you are a good cinematographer. I love how you manage the skin tones and mood. Just one thing. In this industry, it's not only the face that we want lit correctly." Commenter. In the 80s, my dad owned a video store and was approached by an adult video production company to shoot the intro to one of their movies in his store. He agreed, and on the day of the shoot, they informed him that they needed one of the employees to be in the scene as the video store clerk. So there's probably 10 seconds of this hour-long movie with my dad showing these two women to the adult section of the store. Cut to a few months later, the production company wants to do a soft-core cut of the movie for cable channels, and my dad's scene is in the preview for it on the Playboy channel. He gets a call one night from his sister yelling at him about how he's in an adult film. Apparently her husband liked to watch the Playboy channel and saw it. My dad had to explain how he wasn't actually in it, etc. He got a lot of calls while that preview was being shown. Story 12. I don't shoot adult films, or even erotic, but I am a photographer who shoots a lot of art nudes, and my models range from first-time models who only shoot fully clothed to people who shoot in adult films. Before every shoot, I give the model a safety talk in which I say that I won't touch them, that I'll show them every shot I take, and tell them that if anything is making them uncomfortable, I want them to speak up. I once had a model interrupt that talk to say, "My job is mainly shooting bondage and fetish films. There's nothing that you are going to say or do that will make me uncomfortable." That felt awkward to me. I thought about it for a second and told her that I did not care what she did at other times. I was going to treat her like I treated every other model, and then I went on with my model safety talk. I have to admit that I am always a bit nervous working with a model who is new to me. Her saying that actually made me relax a bit during the shoot. Commentaire. Wasn't an extra, but when I was a student and just starting out in photography, I lived in Miami, I met a model, Anita Dark, who asked me to photograph her. I didn't know of her at the time. It came out later in the conversation that she was an adult film star. She was really nice and sweet and asked me to shoot her and a couple of her friends for her website. I was young and single. She was seriously nice and hot, so figured why not. Turned up at her house to find her and two friends nude putting on makeup in the bathroom. Her manager was there along with another girl who was filming with a video camera. After highs and introductions, I started shooting Anita's two friends who were doing a scene. During one point, while one girl was doing the other with a toy, she looked me right in the eyes and said, "It's been ages since I've had a real pen." I then noticed that the girl with the video camera was filming me. I figured out quite quickly that they were hoping I'd join in. I stayed professional, figured that my family would be really disappointed in me and finished the shoot. Said goodbye, sent them the photos, and that was the last of my adult photographer days. Edit. Went to bed with about 10 people calling me an idiot. Not a problem. Plus, my wife regularly likes to call me the same, so I felt the love. Story 13. My dad's in the industry as an erotic photographer, sometimes stepping close to the line to straight-up adult film. I help him out sometimes during shoots. They are a lot of fun most of the time. Everyone is really chill and cool to talk to. He offers courses for other photographers who are trying to start out in the industry. These often take place over the span of a few days in an exotic setting. For example, on islands like Mallorca or Ibiza. We often had run-ins with the police from different countries because tourists called them. He often gets criticism. People call him out for objectifying women and such. And yeah, the industry is brutal and some photographers are assholes. This is why my dad has a moral codex written down on his website and online profiles, which is something that, surprisingly, not many photographers have. Some modeling agencies are straight up awful, going as far as only allowing the models to eat a certain amount of food per day. The only allowed snack during shoots for a former model he had some shootings were Tic Tacs, or to restrict their personal life, preventing them from having boyfriends, controlling their social media, which is why my dad nowadays only works with freelancing models, both male and female. You often hear stories about photographers and models having sex behind the scenes. This is true to an extent. Some do it and fully embrace it, however not without consent from the models. My dad sees his work more as an art form than a pure sex thing. Most of his work is pretty artistic or provocative. People often ask me if I believe him when he says that he'd never touch a model, and yeah, I do. I have so many stories and anecdotes to tell, ranging from funny to tragic and creepy. If there's a demand, I could tell some. Edit. Holy crap, this blew up. I'll get back to everyone as soon as possible. I'll just respond to every comment asking for a story with a different one. So read through all my replies if you're interested. Commander, here you go. One day, I had to shoot photos of an object in nature for a school project. So of course, I asked my dad for help. We took a bright red umbrella and drove to a nearby river in the woods to take photos of the umbrella in different scenarios, kind of telling a story using the pictures. When we were done, I packed everything up and went back to the car. But he just stood there, staring at a small tree. I called him over, he started the car, and we started driving. Suddenly, he slammed the brakes, turned to me and said something along the lines of, "Okay, I can't just drive home without it, I need it." He did a U-turn on this dirty, narrow country road and drove back into the woods, stopping in front of the tree he had stared at. "Dad, do you want to steal a tree?" "I won't steal it, I might bring it back." "But what do you need a tree for?" "Bondage." So we tied the towing ropes that he had in his car to the tree and pulled it out. At first, he wanted to just pull the tree home. Since this would probably end like Jeremy Clarkson's DIY handbrake in the Top Gear Africa special, we decided to cram it into the car. Surprisingly enough, it fit. We even managed to get the trunk to close. The tree just chilled there in between the seats, resting on. Story 14. Dude, I went to university when I had a job working as cameraman for some sleazy Euro-adult films guy in the 90s. This was long before that movies was easily available on the internet. This guy had multiple times he was hit with comm by accident. Commenter. My dad is an actor, and one of his first jobs was being the main non-sexual role in adult films, where he basically visited his high school graduation class crushes and was there to look at them having sex with other dudes. It's hilarious. He basically said he got paid like $500 for the day back in the 80s and was just improvising the entire time. There's a scene where he smiles at the camera while peeking through his roommate's door, and the last scene is him half-talking / half-crying to his roommate while he and another chick are going at it hard. The adult films itself is absolute crap. He was definitely the highlight. Story 15. I was filming a scene with 2 girls. It's not uncommon at all to kneel, sit, lay on the bed to get better shots. One girl ended up more than I've seen in my 30 years as a lesbian, and it went all over me. Not only that, but I had to stay laying in the puddle for a few minutes before I could switch angles. Story 16. Worked on a set as security and observed that, basically, time is money. They want to get specific things on film and, at this time, photographed. That tension if things are not going smoothly or perfectly is not attractive. Production staff are simply trying to achieve all the goals and ensure they check everything off their list, and one inability to deliver causes them a lot of stress. Story 17. Not a photographer, but I worked for an adult company and have been on multiple gay and hetero video sets. There is more poop on a set than you think. Also a fair amount of vomit. I was once on set for a scene that involved faking accidental sex. So, much. Poop. Commenter. My friend worked for a major company whose logo you will see on memes, got invited to be an extra, and did so several times. Got paid a flat rate of $100/shoot. Some would last longer, parodies involving costumes, makeup such as zombie. Others would last just a couple hours, often played the BF who got cheated on. Talent was always super friendly and nice, no terrible stories. Sometimes a lot of waiting around while they shot the sex scenes. Sometimes they would cut just to focus on female talent, saw male talent outside studio doing what he could to maintain stiffness. Some talent and extras would be using stimulants, but nothing terrible substances-wise. It was a job for everyone. Pretty professional and fun. They would often buy lunch for everyone on longer shoots. Easy cash and fun times. Female talent would be overly flirty. Did a zombie parody in Star Wars one amongst other shoots where my girlfriend had sex with the teacher to get out of failing grades for both of us? Or she had sex through's glory hole in a changing room whilst I waited outside? Probably not as exciting an answer as hoped, but if here are any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer. Edit. Couple things coming up. When I said girlfriend, I mean it in the context of the story of the adult we were shooting, not my actual girlfriend. But wouldn't have been opposed to dating one either. I had a girlfriend at the time that was not cheating on me. One thing of note that's kind of funny to mention is when they're shooting sex scenes, there are usually a lot of cuts and actions. It's amazing how in the middle of sex they can stop or start, and the female talent can turn off, and on the pleasure sounds like it's nothing. From completely silent to sounding like she's having the biggest org of her life in 1 second flat, that's quality acting. Then, after the performer used the bathroom for an hour of douching, the scene continued. Every few minutes, a cameraman or sound guy would wipe poop from the dude's pen. They weren't willing to halt filming because they had a tight schedule, and the empty mansion they were filming in had a real estate appointment meeting in it that night. Story 18. When I was 22, I was asked by a friend of mine to record he and his wife have sex. He said it didn't have to be weird because they weren't looking for a threesome or anything like that. I agreed because it sounded interesting, but the sex they had was extremely rough and unexpected. At one point, he started crying while she was doing a certain something to his backside while wearing a large attachment, and I asked if he was all right, which caused him to get pissed and yell at me for interrupting them. I stayed quiet after that and kept recording when he was able to get back in the mood. After they were done, he left the room and his wife asked me to never to bring up him crying to him because he was sensitive about it. I of course agreed, and she hugged me, then kissed me on my cheek, which I really didn't like because she was still naked and covered in sweat. And I just watched her eat him not more than 15 minutes prior. Story 19. Professional photographer, I used to take photos of sex dolls, the real expensive ones that cost thousands of dollars. I had my studio in my garage because my house was too small for any other room. It was the middle of summer, and it was starting to get hot in the garage. Since I was alone, I undressed completely because I was just sweating profusely. These dolls are not easy to position. Their bones are metal and are very heavy. Think an actual girl would at least help you move correctly. Well, as I was grabbing one and moving it into position, my wife walks in the garage, to which I screamed, "This isn't what it looks like!" She knew I was photographing them naked, but she just couldn't stop laughing. Commenter? Not an extra, but I have done some background work in industry. There's a guy in our town who does small-time adult shoots, so just to call myself out as a sexual deviant, I've been tying knots on people for almost 15 years. So this adult guru, that I'll call LL, got my number from a friend who was in one of his shoots and texted me about doing some bondage for a few of his films. LL gives me an idea of what he wants and says he'll pay me per shoot. Because why TF would I say no to that kind of easy money? So I show up, spend a couple hours tying up girls, stay on set to make sure it all works and is safe, and watch a guy rail them. I've had to kind of coach his male star about where to pull to tighten, where to pull to loosen, how not to actually hurt someone, etc. The shoots lasted each about 4.5 hours, give or take. I've done this 4 times for LL now. It's really awkward. I mean, really awkward. About a week ago, he started texting again, asking about sex machines and suspension, and I'm not sure if I like where this is going. Story 20. I mean, I film myself, so I don't know if that counts. It's a little awkward when someone requests you film something like pussy, ass, boobs, toes, and smile at the same time. So it ends up being like, set up camera and lights, put on makeup, get in position, asterisk, check camera angle. Repeat step 3 and 4 until results are satisfactory. Take a bunch of pictures. Check if they're okay, and if yes, do your thing. Asterisk check and see if it actually turned out okay. Asterisk upload to computer, asterisk edit your photos color grade, your skin and genitals. Is that the right shade of pink, or is the shadow a little too purple? Edit. Sequence. Add watermark and intro. Outro. I like my job, obviously. I like it a lot, but man, in the beginning it's so weird to stare at your puss and try to decide if it's the right color and best angle. Never mind listening to yourself dirty talk over and over as you scrub the video or edit the audio. I've ended up helplessly laughing a lot. Answering, "What are you doing?" with watermarking my ass hasn't gotten old though. EETA. Check out Holly Randall's podcast. It's on all podcast apps and on YouTube. She's a well-known adult film director and photographer, and her podcast is great. Lots of behind-the-scenes stories. Story 21. I'm not a pro smut photographer, but I do bondage photography as a hobby. I don't think I've ever really had an awkward moment. The models are always professional, and shoots are always done in about 2 hours. As for what I feel when I film, focused, mostly. Yes, I'm definitely into bondage, but I never really get turned on while filming or taking photos. I'm too focused by the rigging, getting the lighting right, getting the angles right, giving directions to the model, and making sure she's as comfortable as possible. It's more of a creative outlet for me than hot material. Commenter? Story 22. I've seen a video of somebody speaking about his time as an adult cameraman. The smell was generally bad. I mean, they're doing it for hours in a closed room. Then when you're filming from just behind the ass of the dude when he have sex with her, him is the most degrading, he said, because you're filming a dude's a hole and balls going back and forth right in front of you. It's probably also the smelliest place in the room. Story 23. When I was 18, I started shooting adult films for the owner of our local sex toy store chain. I answered an ad on Craigslist. I was shooting a scene of him and his girlfriend, and he nicked the inside of his pen on her tooth in a hardcore BJ scene. Shot BD like a water pistol with every heartbeat for about a minute or so. He was 50 or so, and we shot with his 18 YO girlfriend, who I knew from a different school and had basically run away from home. She lived with him and was kept in a strict relationship, wearing a collar that purposely limited head movement. 24/7. She took care of his kids in between shooting sex toys scenes with me. Totally healthy everything. Another time, we hired a random guy by putting a sign in his toy store with a picture of his girlfriend and the W caption, "You want to sex with this?" Who showed up to the hotel, couldn't get hard, completely normal, performance pressure is a thing. Then drank an entire fifth of rum in 10 minutes, tried to do it soft. He got so sad but couldn't show it, so then he drove off, which the producer allowed him to do. This was a truly terrible experience for me, the way sex can be so degrading to everyone involved if it's controlled by toxicity and crafty values. So now I make ethical movie. That shows how sex can be lovely and consensual and not incredibly abusive. Truly awesome. Support your local ethical adult filmmakers. Story 24. There was this one shoot where the star of the video's mom walked in. It was a mess. She freaked out, screamed, asked what she was thinking. Then she exclaimed, "That's not how you do it, this is." And it was a really beautiful moment between mother and daughter. Story 25. I used to do behind the scenes for Adam and Eve. My friend Will Ryder found his stars off camera and was behind schedule. Another star, Ziggy Star, was sitting next to me. I jokingly said, "Man, seems everyone's getting sex except me," as a joke. She says, "I'll BJ ya." I'm like, "Oh my God, sure." She goes, "Let me just ask my boyfriend." "Hey," boyfriend's name, Garcia Jones, wants to know if I can BJ him. I was freaking out. I didn't ask, you offered. I'm still in regular person mode, where that would surely get me punched in the face. He comes over and over, goes, "Yeah, sure, just make sure you get it on camera for the BTs." So I did. Right out in the open in front of camera guys and Riley Reid, I'm getting a BJ. It was awkward, glorious, and one of my favorite LS stories. Edit. Super proud, honestly, of my work in the biz. Here's the trailer for the latest film we did, and I'm one of the EMT techs, Ilmao. Check this film out. It's hysterical and hot as hell. It won a ton at AVN last year. Story 26. Actual adult videographer here. I work for an independent studio in Los Angeles called Pervacity, and I shoot pro-am scenes of my husband for our site slut inspection. Most awkward on a professional set was when we were shooting a normal MILF boy girl scene and the male talent fingered the MILF so hard that she crapped all over the couch. I love my job. I love creating adult films. I really enjoy working with most of the people in the industry. I just wish we would do a better job to get rid of the predators. Story 27. Okay, story time. We were working a soft core for late-night cable, but the actors were generally hardcore films. So the sex was supposed to simulate it, right? Well, the dummies couldn't figure this out. Meanwhile, the director had a PA sound system wired up so he could direct from the monitor area, Video Village. Well, we were up in the Hollywood Hills in the pool area of a mansion. There are definitely neighbors up there. Anyways, the director had this PA turned up loud, and he'd be shouting at the actors, "Duck her! Duck her! No, don't touch his pen! Don't touch it! Duck her! God damn it! Duck! Fake it!" And on and on and on. Same show. An actress comes out of HMU dressed in only a mid-thigh nightie. She's slinking along next to the pool, tiptoeing around lights and cables when out of nowhere. Asterisk tunk asterisk, her little early 00s Nokia hits the ground. Everyone freezes. Crickets. Where did that phone fall from? She doesn't have enough cleavage. No purse. She wasn't holding it. She turns bright red, snatches the phone, and bolts back into the makeup trailer. Another gig. Loser male actor can't finish. So the second ad gets a squee bottle filled with a little Elmer's glue and key. At the moment of phony point, he squeezes the bottle for the shot and overdoes it so badly it looks like a mother horse was finished his load on this poor girl. The whole crew falls apart laughing and pretty much kill the whole scene. There are more stories, but they're all from years ago and I can't remember them right now. Maybe I'll add more. God, I hope this is the right account. Ad. Mary Carey was running for CA governor. She was on a job I was doing and acting like the most popular person in the world. Hijacking conversations, butting in. Super self-centered me behavior, though at least she was nice about it. Obnoxious. Well, one day she decided pants were optional. She wasn't involved with a sex scene at all. Just decided to let her nethers air out for some reason. So she headed to the craft services table. She rummaged around in her puss for a moment, then rummaged around the Doritos. Scratched her ass, grabbed a handful of M&Ms, more Doritos, etc. I was standing there the whole time. So I got on my radio and said to the crew, looking directly into her eyes, "The Doritos have been compromised." The next day, a very sweaty, naked male actor who just finished railing, a girl comes down to the crafty table and sweats all over it, deciding what to eat. He's literally dripping sex sweat onto the snack table. The key grip marches right over and stiff arms the entire table of food into the trash. Story 28. I worked as a photographer on adult sets shortly back in 2011. It's like any other job. Nothing awkward happened during my year. Most sets have 5 to 12 people. It's fairly professional. I try to do the best to take the best angles of the girls. Work was steady, but I made roughly $30,000, which was considered low back in 2011. I ended up freelancing and starting my own business. A lot of the girls who are traveling strippers supported me early on. Story 29. Explaining the weird stuff like, okay, we have lined you two up so that she can swallow you whole, like a python. Or, we need to stick these tracking dots to you so the software can put in the extra breasts. Or, okay, you have make out with the mannequin, be careful not touch the back of her head, it will knock the camera and mic loose, and so on. Honestly, since I did the effects stuff my mind was on how to get it done, shooting adult films is not sexy, it is work. You learn detachment quickly. Helps I wasn't into anything I was shooting too. I don't do it anymore. Right around the last economic crash, no one was buying, and models were harder to find, so it tipped over to just not worth it. I sometimes think about shooting again, but I have none of the resources anymore. No talent pool, studio, gear, or anything. But I bet I could hit movie quality with the stuff out now. Story 30. This sounds odd, but here goes. A friend was hired to do camera work on sex parties for wealthy clients, and I was part of his staff. The money he got was pretty good, and he always liked barely legal hustles. The deal was pro-camera work, equipment, and professional makeup, which we had 2 or 3 professional anesthetics people with fairly high-quality makeup. So the women could look like Slut Star with good makeup and sexy outfits. Explaining to people it had to be a few degrees colder due to the amount of people and physical activity got aggravating. The estate was huge, massive. Things I noticed, there was a few assholes, but most of the people seemed to be fond of each other. Everyone was chill and with their cliques and were relaxed. Women were much more jealous of somebody with their partner than the guys. Really good-looking men with normal pen always got action, as did the hung dudes. There was substances, booze, and finger foods everywhere. This was basically a club treat for all the swingers in this area, and most didn't think about certain logistics. To do all the scenes with our crew, we had to make a film schedule. Things you don't know or can't explain: don't eat snacks all day when you're going to spend an hour or so taking it in every hole. You will end up eating a fudgesicle. I think nearly everyone on our team had a lil fun of some sort. The weirder aspects is how high school it felt at times in a real odd way. The 67-years-old entrepreneur comforting his wife because no one wants to sex with her and she feels unloved because of it. The buddy guy with a big pen trying to fight the husband who was both uninterested and unprovoked. He had lots of money and security escorted the dude out. A lot of naked dudes and chest rugs. This was a lot of very wealthy people and we were paid well. Considering the type of money that these people had, everyone was really nice to our crew. Outside of set a fairly strict schedule and us having to get everyone filmed, when these get-togethers were just hot parties, typically. There was some oddities and a few fights, but it was a lot more low-key than you'd think. Story 31. Back when I was a broke-out-of-work photojournalist, I would take all sorts of photo gigs to make ends meet, including some adult content. After one of the jobs, the model client, her makeup girl, and I went to a diner to go over the photos and decide which ones I would touch up. She'd been fasting to look skinnier for the shoot, so she wasn't too picky on where we stopped. When we got there, she practically ran to the corner booth before ordering a huge burger. There were well over 1,000 shots, so going through them took a while. Surprisingly, our waiter was incredibly attentive the entire time, despite us sitting there well after the food had been finished. I don't think our waters or coffees were ever less than half full, and he kept reassuring us that we could stay as long as we needed. It was almost annoying how he kept checking on us every few minutes. Once we had narrowed it down to a couple of dozen photos to be touched up, we paid the tab and got up to leave. That's when I noticed the giant mirror right behind the booth. Every time the waiter came over, he got an explicit eyeful of the woman sitting next to me on my laptop screen. Thankfully, the model wasn't exactly bashful about her body and found it hilarious. Story 32. I once did business with a pimp to take photos of his prostitutes for a website since he was trying to expand his business. He would tell them how to pose, what to do, then ask me to take photos of him having sex with them so he could show just what they could do. The prostitutes tried to pay me in sex, but I told them cash was fine. Probably not the most awkward story, but I love telling friends how prostitutes have paid me for my services. Story 33. I took a job during college that required me to film fisting at a hotel. The smell was the most putrid, horrible smell you can imagine. I only did it twice because the last time I was hired, about midway through the shoot, apparently there was not enough lube applied to the receiver's jelly donut. The sheer force of the fist, which actually looks more like punching a wet paper bag than some delicate procedure, caused to rip something in this guy, and we had to rush him to the hospital in my car. There was all kinds of fluid leaking onto my back seat. Some of it looked clear, and some it was red. Never again, not even for what they were paying me. Story 34. For me, the worst thing was when my parents found out what I did. They were devastated. They ended up filing a lawsuit against me, and I had to remove the video. They never agreed to be in it. Story 35. I've shot a lot of fetish and boudoir, and for the most part, it's like shooting anything else. My mind gets focused on light, shadows, composition, etc., rather than, look, there's someone's gaping a hole. Shooting adult content is a lot less glamorous than people think. I've had past partners ask to bring the camera into the bedroom. It's fun, but if you're going to get good content, it's not super sexy. There's a lot of starting and stopping to adjusting lights, set up timers, etc. Story 36. I was an adult photographer for 17 years. From shooting magazines like Men Only and Club International to escort and titles I can't recall. Then I moved on to internet stuff, based in Central Europe. Once shot a girl-boy set, and only when the girl was signing the model release did we see that she was 16. Gulp. My assistant forgot to ask for her official documentation before the shoot. Chatting with a model after work. She says that this is the only way she can get money for herself, as her boyfriend is very controlling and jealous. Turns out he's a big mafia guy who just got out of prison for manslaughter. Never booked her again. The worst were girls who were light on personal hygiene. Some of those smells could fell a bison at 20 meters. A model thought it would be a great idea to break it to her mom that this was her new work. But it turned out both the mom and dad were in town, and both showed up. That was super awkward, as they were totally ashamed and gutted by her choices. Models would steal makeup, clothes, and anything that wasn't nailed down. It was just a job. I ran my own websites, so it allowed me the freedom to live all over the world and party like a pill for all those years. The negatives are that I started to despise myself for depicting women in a certain way. Story 37. Former studio manager. We did a few things, including adult films. Mostly a professional, maybe jaded work environment. So nothing really was out of the ordinary for us. However, there was one performer who used to take a break from filming at 5 p.m. to receive a phone call from her prison-bound boyfriend, who had groomed her since she was 14, a real piece of crap, who had used his fame to take advantage of dozens of vulnerable women and girls. Very uncomfortable. Stays with me nearly a decade later. Story 38. I have a cousin who set up a small casting couch-style business. He was really pretty straightforward with it. He put a lot of his own money into it to start. He rented a nice little office, had a pretty secretary, one of his cousins, and a whole schedule book. The first few weeks, they were seeing 15, 20 girls per day at 15, 30 minutes apiece. The first interview was informational and letting them know what they would be required to do if they so choose. The second interview was a bit longer. A good shower, inspection, tasteful photos, and marking down what they were okay with and what they weren't. There they'd learn what the earning potential is and get offered their first scene. It took only a couple of weeks for the awkwardness to start, and it was primarily in the form of boyfriends, girlfriends, and parents. Yes, parents would storm in and demand all kinds of answers. They'd call the police and landlord and anyone they could to try and shut them down. But in the end, they remained operating for several years. After my cousin and staff had enough money to go on and do something else, they shut down, moved, and did just that. Story 39. Not me, and he was a lighting guy, not a photographer. He worked with Ron Jeremy. Said they guys smelled like cabbage and had a reputation for not paying the crew. He got boned out of his money and went to Ron's house to get his money. Ron argued why he shouldn't get paid and finally paid up. He said the set was generally pretty sad. Lots of powder and crying. Set always smelt terrible even without Ron Jeremy in the room. He said he was pretty celibate for a while after working on the adult film set. Story 40. I've worked in adult for about 6 years total, mostly working for studios. Honestly, feeling awkward has gone out the door. It's very difficult to be awkward when you work in that sort of environment. People ask me if I get turned on while filming. No. I'm more focused on getting the right shots and angles, plus directing the model, which takes the fun out of it. It has happened, but only with models who are extremely good at their job and move fluently. I've discovered working that closely and personally with people is just too much drama. I've taken a step back for the rest of this year, but I've definitely been cum on a couple times. Also had to witness a couple positive STD screenings. That was awk. Story 41. When they can't finish, you cover the girl in Cetaphil or pina colada mix. I still can't drink pina colada. Also, the amount of girls that don't wipe their asses properly is astounding. I'm constantly having to tell girls to use baby wipes if they crap. Some still don't get it or are too high to comprehend it, so you have to wipe their ducking asses. If the girl is especially awful in behavior, I'll let her have poopy butt shots. Story 42. There was a guy who worked at my previous news media company. He used to work for an adult film star before joining where I worked. He used to do the amateur cameraman work, like handing her sex toys and all sorts of crap in her while filming it. He told me he was never personally involved in her activities and never intended to get personal with her. But one day during filming, she started ordering him to having sex with her. He was baffled, and that's where he noped the get out. It's one of the more hilarious stories I got to know from my workmates. Story 43. I shoot and film everything from implied nude art stuff right up through sexy nudes and glamour to hardcore scenes for pro and amateur models and for professional websites. I also manage an OnlyFans of my photography and films. The weirdest thing is how normal it feels during a shoot or filming. During nude photography, there's usually a constant banter with the model even when it's quite an explicit shoot. The arousal is entirely faked, so the conversation is pretty natural. The only time it's awkward generally is when the male model has trouble getting it up. Then there's a bunch of waiting around usually, and then he's like, go, now. And we all have to be ready. Story 44. So my first time filming was my buddy and his GF. We went to this motel, definitely not a hotel, and I went out to drink, calm the nerves, with his GF while he set everything up. I came back and threw in some headphones and we started up. I was pretty buzzed at this point and started getting really into it. The camera had a big microphone that had a foam covering over it and stuck out on the front of the camera, and I got too close to my a-hole and poked it. You can still hear me going, oh, damn, in the video. Also, another time I drove him around while he having sex with this little doll. It was absolutely wild. Liam Blake was his name. Story 45. Not adult, but I did an interview with Ron Jeremy about 12 years ago. He's super gropey, and at the end of the shoot, he grabbed Brittany Sky and exposed her boobs to the whole crew. She looked super uncomfortable, and it was an awkward moment that seemed to last way too long as she tried to fend him off and smiled uncomfortably. Turns out, via another Reddit thread, he molested a girl outside the very location we filmed him that very day. Glad to see he's finally getting in trouble for his crafty behavior. Story 46. I were in Barcelona in 2012 with a friend. We were 18 years old then. We watched FC Barcelona, Real Madrid game, and had to go home to the hotel across the city. Little did we know that they close off the subway after games because of the almost 100,000 fans going home at the same time. We had to walk because we didn't have much cash. After walking for about 10 hours of being lost, we ended up in a ghetto, found a Finnish Rastaman who gave us his old used bong for no reason at all. We went our separate ways and immediately saw adult film in the making with us in the background. We were standing there, looking so confused. holding a bong. I will pay well to see that movie. Story 47. I was assured it wasn't an adult, just in film, by the guy who introduced me to the project, but a few things tipped me off. Every other actor there was an adult actor. We had an alibi if the owner asked us what we were shooting. The title was a sexy riff on a well-known TV show. The director had exclusively directed adult film for 40 years. I just played a cop and never had to drop. Highest paid acting gig I'd ever gotten up to that point in my life. When they asked me what I wanted to credit myself as, I realized I couldn't put my name on it, so I chose my friend's name, to whom I owed some mild revenge. It's still on his IMDb profile. Sorry, Mike.